Afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Oh, excellent. So, look, it's an afternoon session and it's getting a bit late. So I'm going to try my best to give you a bit of energy today and push us through so we can all have a good time for the afternoon. But it would be good to just have a quick show of hands here, because this has been a surprise to me. At the conference so far, there's been heaps of really good discussion around energy, and it's a much greater priority in this sector than I thought it was. We've had AGL, Charter Hall, Energy Australia talking about electrification of transport, Link Logistics talking about making energy and the way it manages energy kind of a differentiator and part of its competitive advantage with the supplier and partner network. I mean, I'm just wondering, as a show of hands here, has anyone had a bit of a shift in their thinking about the way they're thinking about energy as being here exposed to some of the stuff at the conference? Put up your hand if your thinking's changed on energy a little bit. No? Well, I've got some hands over there. Excellent, thank you. Thank you. So, I mean, I've got the pleasure today of stitching together a few of those concepts, because I think if you're able to really unlock the value of electricity data, that some of these concepts around net zero precincts and electrification of transport, automating sustainability reporting, managing assets that we are deploying through net zero, commissioning and maintaining things, and making public disclosures to the market are all things that electricity data, if you manage it well and you can unlock its superpower, it can really help to streamline that whole process and get more value out of that. So I'm James Clements. I head up business development for net zero property at Wattwatchers, and if you're ready, let's go. A lot of you probably won't know who Wattwatchers is, so I promise I'll be very quick in the overview of Wattwatchers. But what you're looking at here is a quick slide on the left-hand side showing you with all the orange balls. This is the way that Wattwatchers works to create a really flexible ecosystem, enables energy data to be used in lots of different ways. We're really grateful and I'm fortunate to have support of great investors like Kalara Capital, and previously Arena, the Clean Energy Finance Corporation, and lots of good government partners that help support us. But to give you an idea about the sorts of things that Wattwatchers does, we make really cost-effective monitoring devices that look like this. They monitor electricity in real time and they have communications inbuilt. They do not require any connection to legacy BMS and EMS systems, and we don't need communications cabling because they're wireless. That just makes installation a whole lot faster and more simple. Most companies really want your electricity data locked into silos, and that's either by design or mistake. But at Wattwatchers, we really want that data to be shareable and accessible to the platforms and the stakeholders that need it, that are part of your business working in it. And we do this securely using cloud infrastructure to make Wattwatchers highly interoperable and to power apps and services that look like this so that we can support really good decision making in organisations. Now, combined with smart design, this makes Wattwatchers just faster and more cost-effective to use than traditional energy management approaches. And we power a much broader ecosystem of solutions. On the left-hand side here of the slide, you can see a lot of our software solutions partners in the centre, and they're able to help us exploit in a really sophisticated way lots of the different uses for electricity data. In the centre, these are some of the companies that we're delivering results for now and we're used in. And on the right-hand side, you can see we're helping companies meet a number of sustainability reporting obligations and also, importantly, managing the assets once they're installed. So a lot of you are probably in the thick of this, but on a net zero journey, there's a bunch of things that you are trying to do. A lot of companies are rating assets under neighbours and GRESB and these sorts of things. I want to bump up those ratings by measuring exclusion areas. If you want the complete picture, particularly for a lot of the people in this room, understanding Scope 3 emissions or tenant usage is going to be really important, as well as trying to get more renewables out there and more generation and electrifying transport and those sorts of things. And at the end of the day, if you're an investor or managing property, you're also going to be making public disclosures to the market, and you need that data to be really credible. And so on a typical journey, electricity data can support all those different elements and right in through into the maintenance if we think about it in a really flexible way. Now, I suppose in a modern building, there is lots of different stakeholders involved from the time that the asset is built through to when it goes into operation. And so in the development stage, we've got teams that are really trying to deliver on the vision and managing National Construction Code requirements, maybe aiming for Green Star, designing for neighbours when it comes to electricity monitoring. At the end of the first year, there's a thirst for more detailed data during that sort of commissioning and tuning phase of the building after the first year of operation. And also, once buildings are in operation, you've got sustainability managers looking to be able to credibly claim and rate the assets so that they can communicate progress to the market. We've got public disclosures that need to be made based on real data that's credible, not estimates. And we've got operations teams trying to keep everything working that have a thirst for more granular, more timely data than most. And importantly, whoever's in the building really needs to have really good tools to manage costs and energy and carbon. Now, I suppose, are the energy management systems we design and deliver today appropriate for this really stakeholder complex environment? You know, you're probably thinking, James, you've chosen a really low-ball example here, but we actually still see a lot of this being delivered, where we have cabled energy monitoring or metering systems wired into an on-site computer that are not internet connected. And then someone typically has to spend many tens of thousands of dollars getting data out of that so they can do what they want with that information to try and get that in the hands of all the stakeholders that need it. And the way that these systems are challenged tends to fall into these sort of three categories. The first is around data management. Now, for data management, this is what I'm talking about, the steps of everything you need to consolidate data, to clean it, to validate it, and to calculate all the metrics that you want. And a lot of organisations have, the reason it's a group of people there is some of our larger customers talk about needing like a small village of people in the organisation to collate that data just for once a year reporting. If you're doing that and not getting that in a more timely fashion, it's just a reporting tool. It's not a way to manage those assets. I suppose then the other way that some of these traditional solutions struggle is rolling up things across sites. Even if you've done the right thing and chosen one technology to whack into all of your assets as you're building them, you typically find that you need to invest professional services at every one of those sites to get data out of it and roll up into some sort of cloud platform that you might be using. And then with the complex set of stakeholders that are involved, you know, in these assets, from sustainability to operations, to asset managers and these sorts of things, everyone has different demands for that data and different ways they want it to be presented to inform their decision making, delivered at different times. But getting that mix right and presenting things in the right way in the right place at the right time is a significant challenge. To help bring this to life a little bit and some of these challenge areas, if you'd like to come up here tomorrow, I'll hand over. So we're going to walk through a series of case studies today to help bring some of this problem space to life and how energy data can be used in these assets, starting with Tamara, who's going to talk a little bit about some of the work that we've done together.
Hello, hi. Oh, well, hi everyone. I'm Tamara from I work in the real estate area. I head up ESG. And James asked me to come up here and talk about our journey and how we actually came to be quite a big customer of Wattwatchers. So for a long time now, for years and years, we've been trying to get energy data from our industrial tenants. And when we started this journey about 5 years ago, we thought asking them would be great and they could give us their data and that would be nice and easy, but actually that was not so easy. And we went through a period of just really incomplete data sets and, you know, everybody tearing their hair out because, you know, they couldn't get data from these tenants. And we thought we could use it as a tenant engagement opportunity to ask people for data and kind of, you know, and I guess feed back to them, you know, their energy usage, but quite frankly, are not interested. Now, why did we want the tenants' data? It's because we wanted to be able to set some Scope 3 emission targets and we weren't able to do that without having access to tenant data. So anyway, so after looking through a whole lot of different solutions, we decided to go with Wattwatchers. So why can't I see the screen? Oh, that screen's really little there, sorry. Oh, great, fabulous. Thank you. Yeah, so we actually talked about whether we sort of incorporate data requirements into leases, whether we sort of went through a period where we engaged on a system called Measurable, which was trying to sort of get into people's tenant portals and that sort of stuff. It was really overcomplicated, and as I said, we just struggled with really incomplete data. After reaching out to Wattwatchers, we actually started rolling them out on a couple of our office assets, and office was a little bit trickier because actually some shutdowns and those sorts of things, but that was okay. We sort of were able to work through that with our tenants. But actually on the industrial side, it was really a very easy solution. We bought a portfolio of industrial assets recently, and our investor needs to have sustainability reporting, basically, and for that we need to be able to report on emissions and to be able to have a trajectory of net zero on our industrial assets. So the first thing we did, even before we settled this portfolio, was actually got Wattwatchers out to scope the metering system, to figure out exactly where all the meters are going to go, what we actually wanted to measure, and then we sort of mapped it all out and then installed it. And so literally within, I think, 6 weeks of acquiring $1 billion portfolio, we were able to have real-life, real-time data. And how that also helped us, not only is in terms of being able to get data to help us with our targets, was that we had a situation with one of our tenants where when we actually looked at the data, we could see some massive spikes in energy consumption that was happening at night time and weekends. And they had solar on the roof, but the solar just wasn't cutting it. And so we were able to actually take the data that we had, go and have a conversation with them and say, look, do you understand that you're spiking in your electricity use, every night? And as it was, they were sort of charging their electric forklifts overnight. They didn't necessarily need to do that. And so we were able to have a really meaningful conversation with them about how they might change the way in which they behave on a day-to-day basis to be able to not only save energy costs but also reduce emissions. And so, that we found that to be a really useful way to use that data. And so, look, we intend to have a lot more conversations like that with our investors and with our tenants, I should say. And in terms of the investor side, we are doing Green Star performance ratings across all of our industrial assets. We're also doing neighbours industrial ratings, actually. And so for both of those rating tools, we're actually required to have whole building electricity data. And so having these meters on means we can get access to that and be able to rate the assets as we need to. So anyway, just I'll hand back to James, but just a very quick sort of overview about how we use Wattwatchers, and I find the the data that we get and the way in which we get that to be very simple, straightforward solution. So
thank you very much, Tamara.
Thanks,
excellent.
James.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, that's great to hear from you because Tamara knows way more about these assets than me. But what was really interesting to me is what differentiates Bearings, I think, from a lot of the work that we see is their investors really required this data as part of a transaction. So that was quite different to what we see. So they're sort of leading the way in this space with their new transactions. I mean, one of the challenges we see with rolling out this sort of technology when people are looking at it from an ROI perspective is, people are unsure about the sorts of things they're going to find, which is fine. But we always find things, and part of the solution, I suppose, that's often not considered as part of these is what's the impact on data management? Like how much time do you save in the organisation, shifting people away from data consolidation and focus on decision making. Now, this is an example from a pilot in an industrial segment we haven't spoken a lot about today, but in the self-storage sector. And it's a really sort of challenging or interesting sector, I think, because it's in this sort of nexus of having relatively low energy spend per site, pretty simple reporting requirements across all of those. But the things that we find in this site are actually pretty typical of lots of different assets. And so there's a real techno-economic challenge to solve there with this. You need cost-effective solutions to be able to be deployed to manage a relatively small amount of energy. But the data management piece of this, when you've got 100 sites or more like this particular customer, is a pretty big challenge to solve. And so what we sort of found here was that we did a small pilot, 20 or so sites. We found issues in more than half of those. A lot of those issues were actually just around base load. So high base load. And for those of you that love charts, you can see this chart at the bottom here. It's difficult to see the shading, but the shading is showing you the operating hours of the facility, and the black line is the load of the facility. So you can see it's pretty much straight, it's not changing, and this is typical in lots of their assets. So that load was not changing. What this sort of meant for the sites is that there was automation equipment that was not working. This is things like integrations with access control that's supposed to turn off lighting, and PIR sensors and things that are supposed to control lighting levels. And so those sorts of things are kind of hard to discover unless you're at the facility after hours. Everyone sort of leaves after hours thinking that, that everything has switched off as planned. But it was kind of really interesting to see that that was happening in a large proportion of sites. We also found that even in the first month of this particular pilot, that 10% of the solar systems that were installed needed some attention. So they stopped generating, the inverters had tripped, and someone needed to go to site to do some engineering work there to reset those inverters. Now, for this particular company, solar is a really important part of the sustainability strategy, and so making sure that the solar systems that have been installed continue to work is a really important one. I suppose one of the issues we see quite a lot that's often hidden in these sites is around power quality, because no one really sort of understands their bills sometimes. There's a number on there. Sometimes you can get penalised for having poor power factor as an example, and sometimes you're paying quite a bit of money for that. Electricity bills are complicated. There's like 80 line items on a C&I bill, and so it's easy to miss. But you do have influence over some of those. And so in this particular case, we found a site that had bad power quality. We also found a site, I suppose, here that was generating a lot more solar than was needed, and so is actually a good candidate for battery storage, which is the direction that particular site's heading in now. I mean, to switch modes a little bit, this is, we heard from Charter Hall earlier today, we're talking a lot about their tenants, which is great to hear. And this is a live customer we've been working with for many years, and we're on a bit of a journey together to try and do more and more things with energy data. So it all started off about GRESB and Green Star rating, about baselining those assets, understanding Scope 3 emissions, solar generation. And when you've got 550 tenants in the portfolio, no one wants to collect that data manually. It would be a real pain. And so there's a really big data management challenge there about getting that data just automatically feeding into a platform. Secondly, tenant engagement was a big priority. And so doing something for the tenant as part of this to help them manage their energy spend is really important to Charter Hall. And you can see, there's a single part of that strategy that's easy to point to. There was an application that was given to the tenants as part of that that helps them set a budget, determine if their solar system's working, and track against that budget in real time. Then someone was hired, an external contractor's hired to maintain the solar assets. They've got like hundreds of kilowatts and probably megawatts of solar in the portfolio. And so that's contracted to another party. Makes sense. You want to try and use that electricity data to be able to support those assets and make sure that they're operational. And then with a focus on technology in the future, I suppose Charter Hall are heading in the direction now of automating more of their operations. So streamlining work order processes and tracking things through from the time that they're identified through to completion. It sounds like a pretty logical progression, but it's not that easy when you kind of consider that each of those things is happening in a separate platform with a different set of stakeholders and different set of people. So I suppose finding technologies that can feed data to multiple places like this so that the multitude of stakeholders involved in working on these assets can do what they need to is a really important part of the picture. And it's unlocking the value of it. Now, I think solar is a really common thing to implement on a net zero world, trying to increase the amount of renewables we have out there. And this particular example actually isn't from industrial portfolios, but it does illustrate the point. This is an example from an 800 school rollout, so it's a really distributed set of solar systems across the state, similar to a lot of geographically distributed industrial portfolios as well. You want to make sure that the solar systems are performing, but I think one of the key things when you deliver solar is it can be quite valuable having an independent source of measurement from the time that the solar system is installed. And so when you commission a solar system, you want to know that it's working correctly. Inverters, funnily enough, don't always tell you or identify the issues at that point. And so having this independent source of verification whilst the system is being commissioned and engineers are on site is a really important part of the project. And in this particular case, there was really tight coordination between people that were using the Wattwatchers system, I suppose, as an independent source of verification, and the field engineers on site doing the work to make sure that from the time that they were installed and completed, solar's working as expected and there was no issues. I suppose in this case, there's lots of things. Once these solar assets are in operation, there's tons of stuff happens in the real world. You might have people going into site to do intentional isolations to carry out electrical works, but forgetting to reset breakers. You might have grid issues. Inverters might fail. Breakers might trip. There's all sorts of things that can happen in real life. And so knowing about those things in a timely fashion is kind of really important. And investments, I suppose one of the key things is that a lot of the investments we make in a net zero journey, like efficiency, and solar is a good example, is that they're not set and forget, and they need continual maintenance with this sort of transparency and visibility to be able to manage them effectively. Because if you're sending someone to site to rectify an issue, you want to make sure that they're prepared. If they need an inverter, they should go with an inverter in hand. Now, one of the, I suppose, key things that we've heard about today from multiple speakers is around the electrification of transport and how important that is in the industrial sector, which is awesome. I suppose there's a lot of value to command after with the right technologies after the chargers are installed. This doesn't just apply to electric vehicles and trucks, but also to electric forklifts. So it's definitely what we're seeing in the UK at the moment is that there's where there's a lot more solar deployments, EV deployments at these sites, is that there's quite a stringent grid process to connect your electric vehicle charger to the grid. And you need a lot of data to be able to support that application. We think that trend will probably continue here in Australia as we deploy more and more electric vehicle chargers. And once that charge is in place, there's definitely an opportunity to coordinate electric vehicle or forklift charging with solar generation to make sure that you've got the best, but also really to also help manage peak load of sites. And even with something like, if you imagine forklift charging in a lot of industrial assets, the end of a shift, people come on, they plug in the forklifts for charging, and if you don't manage it carefully, you can end up with quite a big energy spike for the site. And when that happens, that can just drive a lot of costs for the site. So having ways to control, to get transparency of what's happening with charging of forklifts and electric vehicles, and to manage the way that those things are charging can help manage operational costs for the facility and the electrical capacity within the facility as well. So we've spoken about the big gap that strings all this together as I suppose we haven't been thinking about electricity as an asset in its own right, which means that it's contained and not terribly well utilised, or not as utilised in as many ways as it could be. This is the sort of the big gap that if you're able to address this with your thinking and the way that we deliver these sites, electricity data can be almost like a superpower in your net zero journey to help you sort of tap into the full value stack. And so what you're looking at here is a bit of a checklist of what I think makes a good selection of technologies to make sure that you're able to get the value across data management, sustainability reporting, asset management and operations, and to make sure that you, I suppose, keep your net zero journey on track in a really efficient way and make credible disclosures and track things in a really interesting and credible way. So that is it for me, and if you'd like to speak any further about these topics today, I'm very happy to catch up outside. And one thing I didn't cover off on today, I suppose, that if you'd like to talk to me in more detail is some of the work that we've done in rolling up precincts. Net zero precincts have been a big hot topic today in discussion in the industrial space, so if you want to come and talk to me about those in more detail, please feel free.